let's take a look inside both sides of my brain, the rational side and the irrational side. Take your pick, which one I'm operating mostly on. Actually, the season was really good. I thought it was well constructed. I thought the ending was just the cinematography of it all. It was the time for the show to end. And yes, it took 12 years to get here, but I'm doing perfectly fine. I mean, this is what I wanted. This whole thing is what I wanted. You know, I literally asked for this. So I'm doing really well with it. I feel very good about where we ended in Star Wars. Why didn't they retcon Order 66? It took us 12 years to get here, folks, and that is just so mind-blowing when you consider where we were 12 years ago. I was 12 years old 12 years ago. I was in middle school when I saw the Clone Wars movie come to theaters. Like, I remember it very clearly, and going and seeing Ahsoka Tano on screen for the first time and having kind of mixed feelings about the whole ordeal because it was definitely a different show back then. And I definitely want to do like an overall review of each season of the show. I know my episodic reviews definitely fell through, but I mean, as much as I want to take blame for that, I really can't predict a global pandemic, and it definitely took a toll on sort of my emotional state in making these videos. It just takes a lot of energy for me to do my weekly videos right now. I want to do reviews of the arcs instead at some point, but this right here is my discussion video on season 7 of the Clone Wars. Now, there were 12 episodes this season, which I felt like we could have had a little bit more, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But what we did get here was just Clone Wars at its finest. It definitely feels like a part of the show. You know, some of the problems with rebooted shows or continued shows or reunited shows is that you get this case of it not quite feeling like the show that you fell in love with. Arrested Development is a show that definitely comes to mind. Seasons 1 through 3 feel a certain way. It's very formulaic and it works. It just jives. They were in their stride, their prime. But then they got it renewed for a season 4 and it just didn't feel the same afterwards. But this Clone Wars, it doesn't feel that way. It really doesn't. And I said that when I did my Bad Batch review. But the next time we do a rewatch, it's just going to feel like another continuation. I mean, there is an up in animation quality, and I'll get that out of the way right now, in that as far as animation goes, it's like a really pleasant mixture of old Clone Wars and Rebels, and then even a little bit of Resistance. I hate to admit that, but Resistance is very fluid in its motions, and I felt like this was too. There's a lot more body movement with the characters, and their heads and their bodies and their hands move a lot more naturally than I think they ever did before. Not that it was ever like strictly noticeable that they were rigid and stuff, but there was certainly a more wooden cut to them. But then in Rebels, it's very rounded out, and I thought this was a nice combination of the two. It doesn't look so drastic that you're like, what happened? But you can definitely tell that they improved over time. And with that, the cinematography improved tremendously too. Not that they ever had an issue with that. I mean, Clone Wars was always heavy on the symbolism and the visuals, and I always felt like they did hit the nail on the head with that. You know, like the one scene from season 5 from the Lawless episode comes to mind, where Obi-Wan is just gazing out at Mandalore just in ruins. That's one thing that comes to mind for me. But there's just so many moments in this season that I felt that really, especially the ending episodes, where you really get the visual, like the whole series can be summed up in one image, and that's super powerful and impressive to get across. I think of the 3 arcs in terms of the story and the narrative of this season, the Bad Batch arc is one that I think should have been tacked onto season 6. Season 6 is a little bit more of an everything, you know, it's a little bit of a mixed bag in a good way, a good mix, not like a negative mix. I enjoyed it, I really did, and I enjoy what they did with Echo and how they brought him back into the mix, and just how they approached this X-Men-like society of heroes. And Anakin and Obi-Wan get their taste. We even got a little bit of a cameo from Padme, which I thought was really good, because, you know, tying it back to these characters that we're going to see in Revenge of the Sith, it it does give you a sense of the timeline where we're at in the series. And that was the big thing this season, was kind of being like, where does this fall in tandem with Revenge of the Sith? And that's just something that is so powerful in how we leave off, because you realize very quickly, and I know we knew this because of the trailer, but I just remember when Clone Wars first started, and it was like, oh, we're going to lead up to Order 66 because this is the Clone Wars. This is going to take place from between Attack of the Clones up until Revenge of the Sith. But no, we go well into Revenge of the Sith and after Revenge of the Sith, and you get that sense of continuity, I feel like. It's just really cool to see it from a different perspective in a galaxy. And even in the beginning, you know, we know Padme's pregnant, even though Anakin doesn't know Padme's pregnant yet. I don't know how. I guess he's being polite. And it's really cool that we get to see that, and we're like, oh, so that's where we are right now. And there's just little moments like that throughout, I feel. But even though I thoroughly enjoyed the Bad Batch arc, I felt like, you know, there was an episode or two that, like, I don't know if we needed an entire episode of them escaping and then them going back to that base to try to destroy it. It felt like some of it I was like, okay, I think preference-wise, I would have probably rather seen Ventress's story be concluded than the Bad Batch, even though they had those episodes kind of on the back burner, so I'm not surprised they did that. And again, Echo, I said this in my non-spoiler review, but Echo, I felt as though his character was one that got a real short end of the stick death-wise. I mean, there's a lot of characters like that in Star Wars, and it was cool that they were able to give him a different spin and give him a different purpose. It's really sad when you consider Order 66 is about to happen, and one of the things that I think would have made me feel a little bit more solid about the Bad Batch arc is if we kind of got a flash over to them. I was really surprised that in the finale, and I'm just going to keep going back and forth, I'm really sorry, but I think for the Bad Batch arc, I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't get a callback to that in the finale. I know that in the finale, you know, we see where Ayla Secura is on purpose, we see where Plo Koon is, they flash over to some of the clones turning and everything. I think that would have been, I think I would have liked to see that, because we get this really powerful moment, and I know that it's supposed to be kind of from Ahsoka's point of view, and it's very personal to her and how she's going through Order 66, and it's important that we do that because back once upon a time we didn't think Ahsoka was living, and she's not lived not once, but twice, but 3 times this girl has escaped death, and possibly 4 if we ever get an answer post Return of the Jedi in terms of her position in Rise of Skywalker. But in relevance to this show, I understand why they didn't do it, but they brought the Bad Batch in, and I'm like, look, you can hurt me a lot more, Dave Filoni, if you show Echo after he was just brought back, turning and kind of being encroached in that, and I think that would be a way to really, I think, connect the whole season. And even seeing the Martez sisters from the middle arc, which a lot of people didn't like the middle arc, which was the Ahsoka arc with this, I liked it. It connected Mandalore in, and I appreciated that, because I think it was important to see. I don't think it was really anything I didn't know in regards to Ahsoka. She meets these 2 girls, the Martez sisters. The older one is kind of shifty. She's, you know, trying to support her sister, Trace Martez, and I didn't think that really got resolved as, like, it was very, you know, tied with a ribbon and how that was resolved. The older sister's like, oh crap, maybe I shouldn't bring in my younger sister who looks up to me. And I don't know, I thought that, you know, that wasn't necessarily the part that I cared about. It was how Ahsoka was handling it, and how she's kind of trying to find her place in the galaxy and in the world. And I thought that you know, they did a good job. They show, the Martez sisters are a good way of kind of showing the galaxy's view on the Jedi. And there's a nice story that calls back to something that happens with Zero the Hutt and Cad Bane. And there's just and I think Aurra Sing is kind of loosely referenced as well. And these other places in Star Wars, I'm not sure if it's from the Clone Wars movie or if it's from that other arc with Zero the Hutt in it that I'm forgetting the name of and what season it was in, even though I just rewatched the show. Some of it kind of just blurs together as one big event for me if it doesn't, you know, really affect me mentally and emotionally. Zero the Hutt is not someone I lose sleep over, but I mean, that they talk about something, and I think it's Luminara who they're discussing, and how the Jedi have this very detached view, and while the Jedi think that's a good thing, and how they can serve the galaxy better, and how they can bring about peace, the reality is that it doesn't it's not all it's cracked up to be, because they're looked at as callous in a lot of ways, and they're just kind of looked at as these goody two-shoes that go around and they just destroy what they want because of what they believe in, instead of actually maybe asking the people what they think and what they need, and kind of offering that empathy and support and kindness, and not just shoving their own beliefs down someone's throat, which was very poignant, I think, to today's societies. Showing empathy in the way that the person who requires it needs it, as opposed to just shoving your interpretation on there. But I thought that was when they were at the best, with the Martez sisters, was exploring how the Jedi are viewed in the galaxy. I think in the beginning it was kind of like, The humor in this show, though, is excellent this season. I felt like Ahsoka's character, in general, was just overall just improved, especially in humor. She just has so much personality. And maybe it's because she hasn't been on Clone Wars since season 5, so we lost her for all of season 6, you know? The Ahsoka, she looks a little bit older, a little bit wiser. She's funnier. She has so many moments that I'm like, wow, like even the opening scene with her on the bike and she's like, oh crap, and just like falls. It's very Star Wars. I think that she's very, she's very quippy and funny. She's not the snippy little girl that she was when we first met her. And there's so much about it where I'm like, you've grown so much. Like, it's so painful to watch season 1 Ahsoka, not in terms of like not liking her, because now I appreciate her because of what she becomes later. And I've never been on the hate train of Ahsoka Tano. I didn't quite love her when I first met her. I loved the concept of, her putting a lightsaber in a woman's hand type of deal, and she was my age. She was young when she started, when she was on the show. And now I feel like I've grown with her in a way, and seeing her kind of be like, you know what, regardless of who I'm with and who I'm affiliated with, I'm just going to do what's right. And that's what the Jedi should be about anyway. And they've just become so political, which is what is shown when we get brought into the Mandalore arc. And I really liked that the Martez sisters, they did kind of remind her, I guess, that she's there to do what's right, not to be this moral superiority complex, which is what the Jedi tend to be, and kind of getting her back on track in that in the galaxy. And then Bo-Katan gets flipped in. I was so excited when the Mandalorians were switched in. I had this whole theory, and I actually proved to be correct, in that the Pikes and the gangsters would actually be what pulled Mandalorian, because Maul had them operating under him. And last but not least, we get to the Siege of Mandalore arc, and I will just say that this was almost near perfection. And I say almost only because I think that Mandalore itself, I felt like that was not tied up the way that it probably could be. But then again, there's a lot of ambiguity about it. I didn't expect to get answers as to why they don't take their helmets off in The Mandalorian or anything, because they take their helmets off all the time in Clone Wars and in Rebels. So I didn't anticipate that happening. I think that it was really great that they acknowledged previous moments and the previous Mandalore arc that was season 5 and the fallout of that, and just seeing how much turmoil Maul has put this system through. And Bo is just in a totally different place mentally, because she used to be anti-Satine and anti-pacifism, and she was just so determined to dethrone her sister. And now she kind of sees that this violent uprising, it's not all it's cracked up to be. And she has this moment where she's like, and I wish we could have had more Bo-Katan growth. I think she's a character I think that desperately needs fleshing out. She's a very different character when we see her in Rebels. She's come so far, and I would just like to see kind of the respect that she gains in hindsight for her sister, because while Satine is far from perfect, I think she had the right idea in terms of trying to do things differently and to motivate people with the other strengths about them aside from just dashing in with a fight. She was a little too hardcore about it, I think, but I also think that she was a product of her time in terms of how much violence had occurred in Mandalore. And Bo-Katan is the opposite effect, but the same, process. Satine gets mentioned a lot without actually getting mentioned, which is wild. They never use her name, but they refer to her a lot, which makes sense because it's Mandalore and she was the Duchess. And Bo has this moment though where she's like, my sister tried that. She tried to be different. I don't know anything else but how to go to war. And that's kind of where we're left with her. I wish that we kind of had a moment where she refuses to rule, because we get that in Rebels. I wish that we could have kind of had that, because I think that her getting the opportunity to rule Mandalore is faulty because she doesn't deserve it, you know? And maybe that's controversial, but she doesn't. She never really does anything quite yet to redeem herself for what happened, because she brought Maul there. And I did love the Ahsoka and Bo-Katan interactions. Ahsoka just lights up the screen whenever she's on it, and I just was so happy Ashley Eckstein just brought it. She brought her all. There's just so many moments where they just showcase how badass she is. That explosion that happens after her in the trailer, just chef's kiss to that. Her whole interaction with Maul, oh, I'll get to that in a second. First, we gotta go back to Obi-Wan and Anakin. Anakin, he's so good. He's so kind here. And it just hurts so bad. It's like, you know, we're at Revenge of the Sith. He's about to become a villain in a week. And you're like, but he's so nice and good. But you know that now there's so much corruption linked with the Jedi. And they just had to give another moment of the Jedi being assholes just to remind you that, you know, they were so blind to this whole thing that was occurring, and Maul was privy to it without really knowing all the details. He was suffering. He was literally, and the fact that they were able to put that much momentum into it was just so beyond impressive. And I just really adored how Maul's fear of Vader, and his whole plot was to get Anakin on Mandalore to kill him, because he's like, I gotta prevent this Chosen One thing from happening. And it's not admirable because it's Maul and we've seen what he can do, but it's crazy when you see a villain be that petrified of another villain, and you were just like, oh god, okay, this is serious, even though you know it's serious because it's Darth frickin' Vader. But you know, seeing Anakin interact with Obi-Wan and with Ahsoka, especially Ahsoka, there's just so many soft moments. When that moment with the clone troopers, when he has them with the painted faces of like Ahsoka's emblem, that literally killed me. And I knew it was coming, and it still was like, oh. And the lightsabers, the blue lightsabers, I don't know how I feel about that still. I'm kind of like, well, it was Anakin's customization, so that was what they were trying to get across. Obi-Wan being, you know, torn in a way, because he knows the Jedi aren't perfect, and he acknowledges that a couple times. He feels the corruption and the hypocrisy that's kind of underlying here. And then you got Anakin, who just wants to help so bad, and he wants to reunite with Ahsoka, and it feels so bittersweet because when the three of them are together, they don't quite have a moment to catch up, and they never will. And that realization hurts real bad. You know, they toss in a little moment of Obi-Wan pain too, because they're like, hey, we should bring up Satine again and remind you that she was murdered right in front of you, and Maul wants you here because he's obsessed with you, bud. And Obi-Wan still remains pretty even-keeled, but you know, it's acknowledged, and I appreciated that. Ahsoka, on the other hand, is like, look, we gotta help Mandalore, because we referenced it in the past that we were going to, and then we didn't, and I thought that was weird. Bo was like, bring the Republic here, and Obi-Wan's like, that's an invasion, and then they didn't, and I was like, why didn't you do that? But anyway, I just thought that the episodes were at its best when like these characters were interacting, and then the action was awesome, and like the lead up, and then I realized Maul and Ahsoka had never met at this point. The fight between them goes in several different ways. Like, it's like the beginning in the one episode, and Maul's kind of like, I gotta figure out what you're about, son. And Ahsoka's like, I just know you're bad. I'm just here to stop you. Because Obi-Wan says, like, you look, Maul doesn't stay dead. Just bring him in. That's probably for the best. And the fight sequence, whew, that choreography was just, it was so good. It was so good. I could literally talk about this arc forever, which is why I need to do a separate review on this arc. Ray Park returned as Maul for the choreography, and then Sam Witwer did the voice, and it was just like the perfect Maul combined. So I just feel like Sam Witwer has the voice, but then like Ray Park has like the physique and the just physical intimidation, and just together they were just a combination of force to be reckoned with. And then Ahsoka, they did the mocap for them in their fight, and it just looks really cool. Beyond it looking really cool, it's super emotional and powerful, because he's over here like, look, something bad is about to happen. And she's like, yeah, dude, because you're bad. And it's like, no, Ahsoka, no, but she can't know that. And she comes very close to knowing that. And that's the whole thing, when this show is able to make you feel like these characters were just so damn close to figuring it out and solving it and saving it. And Maul just has this like anguished cry. And that's not even concluding Order 66, which when that happens, and we have to go through Rex and Ahsoka dealing with that and the aftermath of that, and Rex having to, like, you know, be reprogrammed, which I thought it was interesting that, you know, it wasn't really a choice that he made, which is what it's implied in Rebels, but he's so good. And then him and Ahsoka having to fight their way out, and when Ahsoka first felt Order 66, or she felt Anakin turn to the dark side, I had chills, and I'm having chills just thinking about it, like goosebumps. And hearing Hayden Christensen's voice, I bet you she was like, who's that? Oh, it's like I'm thriving off of the pain that I felt. I just thought that they just strung those last few episodes together so perfectly. It was a movie, and they were right to make it as cinematic as it was. I felt like the first 8 episodes felt like Clone Wars, and then the last 4 felt like the movie that we deserved. In fact, the fact that they didn't do a theatrical release, which they wouldn't be able to right now anyway, but the fact that they didn't do that, I'm like, wow, you released the Jabba babysitting storyline in theaters, but not the Siege of Mandalore, when you just went so hard. Like, fantastic. I felt so many things. The ending, they built up so much momentum, like Ahsoka's escape and Rex's escape, and then it just gets quiet and still and visionary, and just that last shot of Ahsoka with the gray cloak looking out and dropping her lightsabers, I'm getting chills again. I'm upset. But that whole sequence where she's looking at those helmets again, and how it parallels when she looked at them earlier, and how loyalty means everything to the clones, and how that's killing her, and how I'm sure it's killing Rex. They made him cry, and I did not like that at all. And the fact that she doesn't know that Anakin is on the dark side, but she almost knew. They come very close. And just that whole thing, and how they transition and they pan over to Darth Vader. I don't know why I didn't expect him to be in this. I kind of expected an epilogue of sorts. I didn't quite expect it to be like this. And he finds the lightsaber that he gave Ahsoka, and you know he remembers, and he just gazes up at the sky, and you can see through the light, you can see Anakin's eyes. And he's skinny and he's young, and you can tell that it's Anakin, that he's freshly Vader. And the Morai, Ahsoka's owl, flies above. And it's just... whew. I think I'm emotionally traumatized. It could have been sadder. It really could have. And I'm not saying that like in that it should have been. They could have hurt me more, but they chose not to. Instead, this remains as the only piece of like Star Wars, in terms of like movies and TV shows, that ends on a note that's not positive. It ends on a very sullen, somber, melancholic note, and it's supposed to, and you're taken well through Revenge of the Sith, and you know what's happening on the other side of the galaxy, and you know what they're going through, and it hurts all the more. And seeing it from Ahsoka and Rex's personalized point of view somehow made it hurt more. It made Order 66 feel personal. It's how I felt when I played Jedi Fallen Order. It's how I felt watching this. I recommend watching this show with a buddy. What did you guys think? Did you love the Clone Wars Season 7? Can you believe that we are finished? I felt like this show actually connected Darth Vader to Anakin Skywalker, and made Anakin someone that you could root for and you can love. And he gave him somebody, Ahsoka Tano, that is so important and intrinsic to Star Wars. And there's just... I can't express enough of my love for this show and this finale. I feel like we finally have closure. And maybe that's why I'm not totally heartbroken that it's over. Because it kind of feels like a breath that we've been holding in for so long is finally released. And we had it, it happened, and now we can rewatch it and see the whole process and know that Rebels is over the horizon after this, and that Ahsoka lives. May the Force be with you guys. Have a great day.